the language being used here, and I'm just saying, looking through all of these statements, the language is one of a company, and we discussed this, way back when on the geopolitical front, etc. Can two companies control the pricing in the market? We talked about it a long time ago. Do you think the scenario has been created now by which they are going to try and pull all of the levers that they possibly can to affect the spot price?
I don't know. I tell you what we can say. Whether they knew it before or not, they've suddenly had a bunch of levers thrust into their hands. Whether they're prepared to use it and how they're prepared to use it, and whether they happen to use similar levers at the same time, I think that's all up for debate, and it's probably not very useful to speculate on that right now. But the fact is they do have some very impressive levers. And as you say, both Cameco and Kazatomprom have made it pretty clear in their own way that they're in a position to turn these assets back on in a manner and in a timing that's of their choosing. And that came out really clearly from Cameco. And I think with Kazatomprom, you always need to read a bit more of the subtext, but that's what we get out of that confirmation, that this is a force majeure event under the subsoil use contract. They can bring it on whenever, if they can keep this asset turned off for as long as they plausibly can maintain that this is in the best interest of the health of their workers, their families, their communities and the country.
I get that, but it's also, it just so happens, the environment which has been created, it's also going to be better for their bottom line if the spot price returns. And the one sure way of doing that is to kind of clean out the mobile inventory in the marketplace. I know we talked about mobile inventory last week, and we'll put links to last week's Cameco discussion below and this article below. But it's in both their interest to engineer a scenario where the price discovery comes back quicker, and with these levers at their disposal, they're in the best place to do it, aren't they?
Yeah, and I think we need to be a little bit careful about talking about both of them together. One thing that I know for an absolute fact is they are both extremely careful not to be seen or even perceived in any way whatsoever to be acting together. And I've been in the room with the key executives and I've seen firsthand that they are extremely careful. So I would be really confident ruling out any form of collusive behaviour and any form of cooperation or even communication about what might happen. But if you look at them separately, each and both of these companies have got significant levers. There's no doubt about that. But I would say Kazatomprom's levers are a lot stronger. And I'd say that for two reasons. One is they've just got more of the market, of course. But the other one is that they can achieve that objective of holding production back to push a market towards price discovery sooner, and at the same time have the secondary effect of inflicting additional pain on their competitors who happen to be joint venture partners. Now, again, I want to stress I don't think their strategy is around trying to play a hard competitive game here. I don't think that would drive their behaviour in any way, and I'm not suggesting that. However, that would be a secondary effect of either them having their hand forced and keeping this production off for longer, or them making an active decision to be rather slow to bring this production back. And as far as secondary effects go, well, that's not a bad one to have in your back pocket as a CEO of a dominant producer in a commodity.
Indeed. And there's one last group, perhaps we won't be so happy. I think both Cameco and Kazatomprom separately have talked about carry trade and the fact that it may now be obsolete.
They have indeed. And the comments in this interview that your listeners can access now, directly made about the carry trade, reflect some of the discussions that you and I have had probably 3 weeks ago, actually. So for people inside the industry, it didn't come as a particular surprise, but certainly for investors out there, it was an interesting confirmation of some of the points that you and I discussed. So Kazatomprom said, in as many words, that the traders won't have the bread and butter business of the carry trade available for them. As you and I discussed, it was for two reasons. One is that they've found it harder to get access to financiers who will carry the material out, given uncertainties at the moment. But the other one is to be able to carry pounds forward under the carry trade, they need to buy them in the here and now spot market and then finance them for a period of time, store them for a period of time, and then deliver them to the utilities, at which point they get their fee. So that material just isn't available. And to have, first of all, the CEO of the world's largest uranium producer telling not only the traders, but the traders' customers that they're going to have a hard time finding material for the carry trade. And then have Grant Isaac, who's the CFO of Cameco, directly endorse those comments, refer to them and endorse them and confirm them on the call that Cameco had last week. That's pretty telling. And the way that Mr. Permatov talked about it is he was saying that the traders are just simply going to have to reinvent themselves to be able to maintain relevance. And their role has been quite important in an oversupplied market. They then had to find ways of making a buck off replacing and moving around excess material. And that's not too hard when you've got an oversupplied market and a couple of producers who represent most of the bottom tier in terms of production cost, who are happy to just be selling even though the spot prices continue to fall. Now that we've moved from deficit into what looks to be serious and deep deficit as a result of COVID-19, they won't have that role to play. Their relevance won't be the same in the market. And they'll either have to find much more innovative ways of producing product and producing trades, or they'll need to find another commodity, I suppose.
Now, all this is happening whilst there's potentially is a deficit in the market and there's a lot less energy being used. But do we know anything about the numbers there? Is it meaningful, or is it too early to tell?
It's certainly not going to lead to a deficit. We have seen, I think what you're referring to is some of the reports that are starting to put numbers on the demand side. So in other words, what impact has COVID-19 had on short-term nuclear power demand? In the scheme of things, it still is nowhere near meaningful. But just to give you an idea, approximate numbers, EDF has said that their quarter production will be down about 15%. Now, EDF is the nuclear utility in France, so they're a special case. Because they produce 2/3 of France's energy, they're going to have quite a straight line, direct relationship between France's overall energy demand and what they produce as nuclear power. And so that's very much a reflection of the destruction of industrial energy demand while France has been in a lockdown. It's only one quarter. They've achieved that through rearranging outages and maintenance and so forth. So it may not have directly affected, or the impact on the full year might not be as big. And we are starting to see France come out of the lockdown. So open question as to how -15 is going to change over the remaining quarters of this year and obviously into next year. But in other markets where nuclear power isn't so dominant, the effects have been a lot less. And that's because nuclear power is a very natural source of energy during a crisis like this. For a start, all of the power is on site. So unlike, say, coal or natural gas, there's no supply chain that's at risk. Secondly, the power is paid for because the nuclear fuel was bought and fabricated over the last couple of years. And thirdly, nuclear power plants have a tremendous output per body, per human worker at the plant. And they run like laboratories. They're basically made for social distancing. And they can reduce their workforce quite considerably through either absenteeism or people shift changes, et cetera, as a result of COVID-19, and still run at full production. So they're a natural choice to just keep chugging along. So in the US, where they represent about a quarter of US energy output, we've seen them drop a couple of percentage points. compared to an industrial demand that's dropped significantly more. So it's we've got the first numbers now that we can play with and start to analyse, but I still think it doesn't go anywhere near being meaningful in terms of a reduction in demand. And the most meaningful part of the sector is China, and they've confirmed that COVID-19 has not affected the construction schedule of any of their 14 reactors that they've got under construction, and neither has it affected the production output of any of their nuclear power plants. And in fact, that was a point that Kazatomprom was quite careful to make in their results this week.